Minnesota veterans from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and now Iraq and Afghanistan are our neighbors, colleagues, and friends. Yet oftentimes their presence as war heroes isn't necessarily felt. In the next hour, we'll introduce you to a number of veterans as they learn to cope and thrive after their wartime service.
Minnesota Vets, Home and Hope is a co-production of the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs and TPT's Minnesota Channel.
I am a veteran. I served one tour in Iraq with the 34th Infantry Division.
I served in Vietnam.
2nd Division in Korea.
I was in the U.S. Navy.
Veteran means any person who has been separated under honorable conditions from any branch of the armed forces of the
after
United
having
States.
served an active duty for 181.
Or by reason of disability incurred while serving on active duty.
Or who has active military service certified.
And who is a citizen of the United States or is a resident alien.
How was Iraq for me? How was it like to go to war, Joe?
We ended up in Baghdad, Iraq.
Went in 1999 after graduating high school.
And I was in the Army in a tank battalion.
Artillery in Vietnam in 65 and 66.
I was an M60 machine gunner. Ran a lot of convoys, a lot of river patrol, things like that.
Well, it's life-changing. With all the stuff that goes on there, you have to remember why you're there and what your purpose is.
It's hard to describe if you're not a veteran, but there's an instant bond between veterans.
You grow up kind of different when you're overseas in Baghdad.
War isn't something people like to talk about, especially with people who haven't experienced the same situation.
Got captured Thanksgiving evening. I got out the day war was over.
Something that never goes away.
I get to graduate college with no debt.
When I go back to school, it'd be more focused on what I need to get done.
I see Vietnam guys, they thank me for my service, and it's like, hey, you know, the only reason I'm having these benefits is because you did it.
There's a lot of veterans out there, even World War II and Korean veterans, that don't know about this.
I held up my end of the bargain, and now I'm very grateful to take my benefits.
Get out there, get them, use them, do what you need to do.
Minnesota's veterans live in a land of opportunity when it comes to the federal, state, and local services available to them. Yet finding and wading through the forms, benefits, and regulations is difficult. However, veterans have advocates. Throughout the state, county veterans service officers are available to connect the vets to the services that they need. Now, the next piece takes a look at vet service offices in Redwood County, where they're helping those who are willing.
Doctor, how are you doing in that regard with sleep
Well,
disturbance and nightmares?
Still having the dreams. They're so darn different and weird. It's not all Vietnam. Some are, some aren't. And, you wake up, you get up. Eventually, I usually go back to bed, and I can go back to sleep.
This last couple 3 weeks might have been horrible because it's so weird because they're different dreams.
So many different things,
and I can't understand. I don't know what's going on.
What you witnessed this morning was an effort made by my predecessor, Harold Reed. Here in Redwood County, we're a 2-hour drive from the VA medical centers, whether it's St. Cloud, Minneapolis, or Sioux Falls. They have the community-based outpatient clinics, the CBOCs, St. James, Montevideo, but again, they're still driving over an hour to go to a meeting. So Harold had set up some contracting efforts where a counselor will come out and we will hold these group meetings every Tuesday. And it starts out in the morning with the Vietnam group at 9 a.m. And then it goes at 10 o'clock. We have the Korea World War II group that meets. This here is like they're sitting down with their best friends who were there with them. Even though it may have been different years, in different eras, in different wars, they have that common bond, and which allows them to talk about some of these things and talk through some issues that they may or may not be having, and it really brings like the team effort of like a group therapy. All in the meantime, if they have any problems with or any issues with the VA or need assistance in one way or another, we have them right here where, you know, Julie, the counselor that you met this morning, could come over and talk to me and say, you know, we should probably look at getting some more help for this individual. But these gentlemen that come to these groups, it gives them the opportunity to have these conversations with a comrade. You know, you hear a lot about people that will say, you know, I didn't get to hear my grandfather's story. He didn't want to talk to me about the war, or my father never talked about what he did in the service. Well, it's because war isn't something people like to talk about, especially with people who haven't experienced the same situation.
We came from that era of a unlikable war, and America in its whole looked at us as losing the war. And it wasn't us that lost the war. We won all the battles. The politicians are the ones that gave up on the war. And it doesn't matter which side of the aisle. I mean, we all agreed that it was an unjust thing.
Dale doesn't mince any words when it comes to
Well, that's fine. That don't bother.
Me either. I think it's great.
But in answer to your question here, really, of what we would advise others coming home from Iraq or Afghanistan is just simply to find someone they can trust. Find a comrade from Vietnam, or if their dad was in Korea or whatever, just to talk about close calls, their tour, their second tour, their third tour, God for how many tours some of these young guys and women have gone through, but they need to talk about it, because if you keep it in like most of us did for 20 years, it'll eat you up.
From personal experience, okay, I think of the veteran service officer here and Julie, and when I got involved in this group, I wasn't sure yet, you know, myself at all. And then I did have a few people that kind of say to me, stick with it, like Lauri here. I thank him for that, and it really helps me a lot. And I'm so glad, because my son, he put 3 tours, 2 in Iraq and 1 in another place, you know. And he's having problems now, and I told, from experience here, I says, go get help, you gotta do this and do this. And now he's getting help, and he needs it, and he's getting the help that he needs now.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Some of what you've heard this morning has probably seemed very insignificant or whatever. But this hour and a half is something I really look forward to. I was like Dell, I resisted this, very much so. But there's a group of guys here, we can talk to each other. When we leave the room, it stays here. The only thing my wife will say to me is, how was the meeting? And I'll go good or bad, and that's all she ever asks. Because sometimes we just BS. You ain't seen the heavy yet, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Without having this weekly check-in, I think it'd be so easy to slip back into the old ways, that you start hiding, you start withdrawing from basically everything, and feeling that loneliness that so many veterans do.
The roundtable discussion is my sanity. Without it, I don't think I would be a very sociable guy. It kind of brings a calmness to me.
My wife says don't ever quit those meetings. You need them. That's what it means to me.
County Veterans Service Officers are a go-between for the veterans when they have questions about benefits. Here to further explain, Marty Caraway, who you just saw in the last piece. He's a service officer in Redwood County. And Reggie Worlds with the Department of Veterans Affairs works closely with the CVSO program. Reggie, first of all, just explain the purpose of these offices.
These offices provide community service. That when veterans out in the community, when they need that assistance, this is the person that they're going to go into that is going to give them the gateway to veteran services, be able to provide them with all of the services they need, get them to their proper referral. They are the gatekeepers.
And why is that gatekeeper so important to have?
Because otherwise you'll see a lot of veterans slip through the cracks. And that's exactly what we don't want to see is, that gate, that, the gatekeeper, as you put it. I mean, how many veterans would actually drive to St. Paul from Redwood Falls to see a veteran service officer at the federal building? Very little.
And you even transport them, right? You help them get
to the
there?
medical centers, and if they have a hearing and our bus is going to the medical center, absolutely.
That's great. And how about what's working? What are some of the success stories for you?
Well, there are so many, because now we have heightened awareness out in the community. We have an aggressive campaign letting veterans know exactly what entitlements are out there. So we have veterans coming into offices now in record numbers, because now they have a feeling of, number one, that there's care there. And here in the state of Minnesota, we have done a good job of putting that care into our services.
So the numbers are getting better, because that's an alarming statistic that 60% of veterans never apply for benefits.
It is an alarming statistic, and we here in the state of Minnesota, we are very aggressive about going out, making sure that people know what those entitlements are, making sure that they are aware of those services that are available. And I can't be more proud than to be a veteran here in the state of Minnesota.
Do you have to be aggressive and kind of force people to come on in? It sounds like they love it once they get there, but we know how reserved Minnesotans, especially veterans, can be. You have to really encourage them.
Right, and there's so much pride. They have the military pride, and they don't want to walk in and say something's wrong with me. And so you have to talk to the veterans like they're your friend. I mean, you are their friend, you're their comrade, your brothers and sisters in arms. And that's the way you have to talk with veterans, and then they'll feel more comfortable coming in and actually opening up with you. But I don't think we have to force them. I think once you build a rapport and you build that trust with the veteran community, they'll come to you.
And you're veterans yourselves as the officers, correct?
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
That has to make a huge difference.
It makes a huge difference when you're talking to one of your own, somebody that can understand, somebody that can really go along that same path that you've been along. It makes a huge difference.
How about the different eras? I think we just saw in the piece a little bit about the Vietnam guys saying, the old way. If we go back to the old ways, if I don't talk about it, if you hold it in for 20 years, it'll come back. So how do you deal with the different eras and their different needs?
It's really difficult to say. I think we have to take them on a case-by-case basis. Some, like Marty said before, are ready to talk, but there are some that we have to talk into it. We have to build that trust. We have a saying, when you come in or when the veteran comes into us, we get one shot. We get one shot to lay out that trust, to let them know that our heart's in it, that we're going to walk with them step by step through the entire process. And once we build that trust and we establish that credibility with the veteran, then it becomes a lot easier. But we cannot lose focus with this veteran. And it sometimes takes months, sometimes it takes years, but we stick with it. We never let that guy go.
Marty, if you got one shot, what do you say in that one shot?
Hi, I'm Marty. And in the one shot, when they first come in the office, and like Reggie said, I mean, with that military pride, they come in and they may not want to do anything with the VA. Especially, they look at the government as being the big brother, and you just kind of have to break that perception. And you just, I talk to them like they're friends. Like by the time I'm done, after about 45 minutes, that person knows me as well as I know them, because the way I deal with my issues is I talk to the veterans. and I have that release where I'm going to put me on the line so that way you feel comfortable releasing your deepest, darkest secrets to me.
And finally, Reggie, how do you deal with the newer veterans now? We saw some of the older, but how about the Iraq and Afghanistan, those veterans? How are you getting them into the offices?
Well, you know, they're a lot more tech savvy, you know, so we utilize technology, computers, websites, and we also rely on some of the older community. Surprisingly, the Vietnam veterans have been some of the most staunchest advocates for these young guys coming back. So they are very quick to go in and just like the piece said earlier, hey, don't wait as long as I did. You know, if there's some issues there, and they recognize it. I mean, they see themselves in these young people, and they're very quick to want to go up and talk to them and say, hey, this is where I'm at. This is what I've done. This is what I had to deal with. Please don't wait as long as I have. So we not only have to thank, you know, some of the new initiatives that are coming out, but some of the older veterans that have been out there for years. We have to really pat them on the back for going out there, being advocates for their young counterparts.
Thanks, Reggie, Marty. Appreciate it. Minnesota is leading the way in providing non-traditional partnership in order to help its veterans. Through the Department of Veterans Affairs' creation of Minnesota Service Corps, veterans are able to receive help regardless of where they live. By partnering with Lutheran Social Services, the MDVA is able to offer a wide array of programs, ranging from family to financial counseling. Johnny Ball is a Vietnam vet, and Patrick Cotter is an Iraq vet. Both are finding answers to their very different questions through the help of CORE and LSS.
When I first got out of the service, I worked in labor jobs. I sold industrial chemicals. I sold printing supplies. I worked as a printer's rep. I had a couple of my own businesses, and the economy went south, and guess who found themselves unemployed again? I'm not a shy guy, so I started calling around looking for various types of help.
Johnny was referred by his county veteran service officer, I think primarily for financial counseling.
So my financial situation continues to deteriorate to today, where I'm concerned about foreclosure and bankruptcy.
We did refer him to a financial counseling appointment, but based on the case assessment and speaking with him further, found out that there were some other resources that he could possibly benefit from.
She's been wonderful. Before I got this job, I hadn't bought any clothes in a couple of years, and she started making phone calls all over the place.
He was going to be starting an internship and needed some professional clothing, and so I was able to find some resources for men to receive some professional clothing and provide him with that information.
And she's there. If I have problems or questions, she's one of those go-to people.
I've also been able to connect with him, just check in with him regularly, and just providing some support and encouragement.
They're real kind people, and they'll help. They do.
We have Benin, who's 5, and we have Evelyn, who's 3. So we've been very blessed with 2 very good kids.
I was gone in Iraq for roughly 8 months, and before that I was in training for the Army for about 14 months. So yeah, a better part of about 2 years.
We're finding that veterans are having struggles reintegrating after a more recent deployment.
Because it's almost as if we're kind of like newlyweds, like we're trying to remember how to do this again. Because although we've been married for 6 years, we haven't lived together for quite a long time.
Did you eat your food? Yeah. Did you eat all of it? Man, you have money, kid. That's awesome. How do we train them to do that? There were a lot of things that we were hitting and missing on, as far as miscommunicating, not really spending the time together that we should have or could have. So you have to kind of find something to help sift through the mess and solve the problems that you have.
I'm finding specifically with veterans that a lot of them have a tremendous amount of pride, which is wonderful, but it's been difficult for them to ask for help in some cases. And so knowing that there is a veteran-specific resource has been helpful to them for that.
Let's go, bud. It's hard to admit that you're failing in a marriage or a relationship. So it's difficult to make that first call, you know, or even where to start, because it becomes such a jungled mess in a relationship when things aren't getting worked out. Time you gonna be home?
In many cases, in dealing with these family situations of a reintegration, we're able to provide a variety of counseling services and really take a holistic approach. For example, I may be working with the wife, and another colleague of mine may work with the husband, and one of us may be doing couples counseling as well. And within that work together, we can, you know, discuss the parenting issues and coordinate with one another on, you know, how things are going with the family. And so making sure each person is getting their individual needs met, as well as focusing on the couple relationship.
And I think there just comes a time where you have to say, okay, we can't do this alone. Because I think for a long time you do, because you see so many people do it. But there just comes that point when you're like, okay, we need a little bit more help, because the challenges we're facing are something that we're not equipped for.
Here to tell us more about the partnership formed through the creation of Minnesota Service Corps is Mary Beth Galey. Mary Beth is a liaison between Lutheran Social Services and the MDVA. And Reggie Worlds rejoins us as well. Mary Beth, first of all, explain what CORE is.
Sure, I'm very happy to be here, and it's our pleasure to be able to represent Lutheran Social Service. We were asked to develop a case management program for service members, veterans, and their immediate family members across the state, with the recognition from the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs that they were not able to cover the whole state, and the LSS infrastructure across the state is already existing. And so the case management was recognized as a gap potentially for some of our rural veterans and their family members. So our colleagues at the MDVA said, you know, we really want to look at opportunities to partner with you and your existing structure so we can take advantage of the staff that we already have in place. We came up with the concept of the CORE program, which stands for Case Management, Outreach, Referral, and Education. And really it's meant to act as an auxiliary service for the VA so that we can provide services related to the immediate family members, not just the veterans themselves.
Reggie, talk about how this is plugging in different areas, because there are quite a few services in the metro area, but it's hard to cover the whole state. And it's a different entree, isn't it, having Lutheran Social Services? It doesn't say veterans on it, right?
It is, because a lot of our veteran population really don't want to come to mainstream veteran services. They want to go out and seek things that are closer in their community. Lutheran Social Services provides them with the opportunity to do so. They have a vast network of folks, and being able to do something in your own community probably provides a lot more comfort for that veteran.
And do you have to be Lutheran? Let's just say that out.
You don't have to be Lutheran,
Okay.
and in fact, we've served 850 families so far that are not necessarily Lutheran, but we do have a variety of services that they can use, and as Reggie said, there's a lot of interest in using our services because they are not necessarily affiliated with the government or the state or the VA system. And there is some comfort level in the confidentiality that we carry as our setting allows. And we do offer free services, and so that's obviously a very helpful asset to all of the clients that we serve.
Yeah, free sounds key. We heard somebody there who's dealing with foreclosure, bankruptcy. Those are issues that a lot of Minnesotans and especially veterans are facing. Is that a growing concern for you?
It's a huge issue for many of our veterans, particularly, well, really across all of the service areas. We find that people are just struggling with a variety of issues. Debt being an obvious issue that many people are dealing with right now, and we have financial counseling to help budgeting and foreclosure prevention kinds of things. But we also have case management where people are navigating different needs and different resources that we happen to know about in their community or in their area, in their county system that they may not have known that they could access. And so we really take each case as a case-by-case basis to be able to customize our plan of action to each person's needs. And so you might come in for one service that you might think that you need and end up using a number of the different services that we offer.
And Reggie, how do your services dovetail with that, with people trying to come out of this recession and dealing with many of those issues?
Well, you know, Lutheran Social Services, of course, has a vast network of folks, and of course, as they're looking towards the specific need of the individual veteran, they can say, okay, we came in and the veteran had a problem, financial counseling. We're going to get them on a debt management plan. However, maybe there's another resource in the community that can help them get their mortgage caught up. All of a sudden, maybe we find out that even though the veteran went in to see the county veteran service officer, now some more issues have funneled their way to the top, and they can make that direct referral back to the county veteran service officer so they can address those needs as well.
And Mary Beth, finally, really addressing the whole family too.
Yes, and part of what we really enjoy doing is tapping into the services and the people who would not otherwise come through the VA system, the spouses, the children, sometimes the parents and the siblings, and we're able to provide them services through the core program, so it's very, very pleasurable to us.
Great, thank you.
I am back now, going to school. I am pursuing my civilian career, living my life, loving my life.
I joined the military in January of 2002. I was 17 years old at the time.
My family has had quite a large amount of tragedy with wars in the past. I still have a brother laying in the bottom of the ocean in South Pacific in an aircraft carrier.
Dad was always in the military, and so I would always iron his uniforms and shine his boots and everything, and so I kind of always knew that I would join.
I tell anyone who asks me, what was it like in Iraq, that you have to understand that it depends a lot where you were in Iraq and when you were there. And those two factors probably will shape how you see Iraq more than anything else.
We had a lot of interaction with the Iraqi people, and my experience there was amazing.
And our mission primarily was to keep the boats and gun runners and what have you coming up and down the coast of North Vietnam.
I was with the 82nd Airborne, so I had enlisted as an airborne trooper. So we spent about 17 months in Korea.
But the World War II guys.
You know, when we first went into France, before we got off of the ship, the captain gave us some orders, you know, about what we could do and couldn't do, and well, he says there isn't much that you can't do. Outside, he says you shouldn't do anything with churches and stuff like that, you know, religious stuff. But that come to an end in a hurry. The first day we went in, that's what we had to do. They had to take a church down. We went about 3/4 of a mile, and then guys were getting shot, wounded. Had a couple guys killed. That's the first damn thing we done. I opened fire up on the church with the machine gun. I just rattled the heck out of it, and then the mortar section was next to me, and I says, you better start laying shells in there, because that's where we was getting the trouble from. They was up in the church steeple. So it didn't take us long to take care of that. All stuff like that, you know, you don't like to talk about it, but you gotta do it.
By now, the message should be pretty well mapped out. A veteran's service makes them eligible for aid and assistance. And the fact remains that after they've returned home, nearly 60% of Minnesota's vets never apply for any aid. Michael Pugliese, the Commissioner of Veterans Programs and Services, joins us now to discuss the makeup of veteran and how they can help throughout these services that are provided. Again, that stat is still pretty amazing, 60%, more than half, not taking advantage of the programs that are right there for them, free. Why do you think that is?
You know, as you said, it's very alarming. And there are a lot of different barriers that exist for veterans. You know, Vietnam veterans, there's a little distrust of the government, so they might not feel comfortable coming forward. There's a pride. You know, when you serve in the military, you're strong, you're tough. You don't want to admit your weaknesses. You don't want to come forward and maybe say, I'm having some issues, especially if they're mental health, post-traumatic stress disorder. So I think those barriers exist. Plus, you know, you don't really see the Department of Veterans Affairs on the federal side advertising on TV ever. So there's not a lot of awareness out there. So that's where we come in. We try to fill those gaps as the State Department of Veterans Affairs, and we do that through our outreach efforts. You know, heightening awareness.
Yeah, the state's really turned into a model because you are out there, and other states are even looking at Minnesota, aren't they, to say what you're doing on reintegration and various things.
Yes, we really have some wonderful programs that are getting some national recognition, you know, and we're thrilled about that. We have some best practice that we're sharing with other states, you know, and we're willing to try new things. You know, this partnership with Lutheran Social Services through our core program, you know, using and tapping into existing services rather than trying to recreate the wheel. You know, it's an effective and an efficient way of utilizing the money that we have, too. So, you know, we're really about getting out there, reaching out, making sure we heighten awareness in the community, not just in the veteran community, but the community at large. You know, educating their neighbors so that they might know, hey, my neighbor next door, Joe, is a veteran. Let me tell him about this service. Let me make sure he knows there's a county veteran service officer just down the road, connecting them to those services. And then we get out there and do the hard work, too, with our staff. Going out there in the community, identifying the veterans, building that rapport, building that trust, and then bringing them forward so we can connect them to those services.
You mentioned the community. What can those of us who aren't veterans out there in the community do? What do we need to know? How can we help?
You know, the best thing you can do is just tell veterans that there are services for you, there is help for you, and every county, 87 counties in Minnesota, everyone has a county veteran service officer. They're easy to locate, they're experts, they're trained well in the field, they know about all the different resources, they partner with our core program, they partner with us, they walk them through the entire process. So I'd say one of the most important things to do is reach out and say, there is help, and it's right here in your hometown.
An important theme seems to be the older veterans, the newer veterans. We have quite a different strata now of veterans who may feel differently about services. How are you dealing with that?
Well, you know, you're right. We have a very diverse veteran community, and we really try to tailor our programs and services to meet those diverse needs. You know, from Vietnam veterans to our current returning troops. You know, they're looking for different types of services, and it takes a different way of reaching out to them, connecting with them. So we really are very mindful of the different generations and what it takes to reach out to them and the services that they need. So we really try to work with our different partners, our county veteran service officers, providers in the community, to identify what the needs are and then create a program that's going to serve those needs.
And where should people go if they want services?
People should go to their county veteran service officers. That's the best place to start.
And they can find that online?
They can find that on our website. They can find that in their local government pages. And they can find it pretty much anywhere on the internet. If you want to Google County Veteran Service Officer Minnesota, you'll get their website. Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs, you'll get our website, and it connects you right to those services.
Very good. Thank you. One of the benefits available to veterans was signed into law by FDR in 1944. The Servicemen's Readjustment Act, more commonly referred to as the GI Bill, has been providing opportunities to returning soldiers for decades. With help from Armed Forces archival footage from 1945, here's a look at why the GI Bill was set up and how it's now helping one recently returned Iraq veteran.
Back in 1918, these were pretty exciting pictures. The fighting men of America coming home from France. Down Fifth Avenue they marched with their brass shining and grins a mile wide. The crowds cheered and waved flags, and the doughboys home from Chateau Thierry and Belleau Wood planned on picking up their lives just where they'd left them. Only for a lot of them, it didn't work out that way. Not exactly. Some of these marching men wanted to go back to school, but discovered they didn't have the money. They wanted something better. But for these returning soldiers, no legislation had been passed, nor any program mapped out to give them the break they deserved. They got medals, but 15 years later, some of these men were selling apples on street corners.
What about this time, Mac? Are these Navy boys going to get the same sort of deal? When it's all over, is it going to be like last time for them?
No, this time it's going to be different.
Yeah? What makes you so sure?
Because in Washington, There were a group of congressmen with long memories who were in the last war. They knew that when a man gets out of the Army or Navy or Marines, he's worried most about a job, an education, and a home.
I heard somebody say one time that gratitude comes from the realization that of all the things you have in life and of all the opportunities you've been given, you aren't necessarily deserving. And I don't necessarily feel deserving of the GI Bill, but I understand like that's the government's commitment that they said that they were going to hold up. I held up my end of the bargain, and now I'm very grateful to take my benefits. There's so much value in an education. A college education is becoming a prerequisite. I mean, high school used to be a prerequisite, but now really it's college. And so many people can't get through college without going into an insane amount of debt. I get to graduate college with no debt. No debt. And they have this new GI Bill, this new Chapter 33 GI Bill they have for folks who have served after 9/11. And I think the idea with that is if you got into the military after 9/11, or if you got into the military after 2003. After 9/11, you really knew something was going down. But after 2003, you knew that if you got in the military, you're probably going to deploy somewhere. You're probably going to go somewhere that's not so awesome. So they put in this new GI Bill to try to entice more people to come along. Chapter 30 is what I had before I started using this new Chapter 33 GI Bill. Chapter 30 says that you pay a certain amount into it every month. You pay $100 into it every month, and I think I paid for 12 months. And then after you pay into it and you meet a certain amount of active duty time, then you get what they say is 100% of that money back monthly. I think it's in the neighborhood of $1,400 or $1,500 for me, completely paid into Chapter 30. Chapter 33 is going to give me an amount of money to pay for my tuition, and it's all the way up to the highest, however much the highest costing public school in the state is. So per semester, I think I can go up to like $4,800 for total tuition costs. Now on top of that, then I also get a monthly chunk of money to live. So it's a pretty awesome deal. Like I've gone to Iraq, yeah, that was my end of the bargain. I held up my end of the bargain for the Army, and now the Army is going to hold up their end of the bargain, where I get a chunk of money to pay for school, and I get a chunk of money. Granted, I have to keep the overhead pretty low. It's not, I don't get to live like a rich man or anything, but I get a chunk of money to live too.
I guess I was all wrong about it being like last time. But wait a second. What about the beautiful blonde? Don't tell me the GI Bill of Rights guarantees every returning serviceman one of those, too.
No, that's still up to the veteran. Just as it's up to him to take advantage of the GI Bill of Rights and not expect the government to come after him. The GI Bill of Rights is not a reward or a handout or a gravy train, but rather an American way to make it easier for each man to take his place once again in the community and get some of those things for which he went to war. A job, a business, an education, a home.
Once a veteran takes the necessary and often perplexing steps to apply for their education benefits, getting into the flow and thriving at their college or university can be a daunting task. However, once on campus, veterans can find solace that they do have a place to go.
The importance of a Veteran Center is just that. It's a central place to go, and it shows to you that the college or university is concerned about you and recognizes that you have unique needs that have to be addressed in a different environment. There's other student populations on campuses as well that have similar needs, and so they also often have centers of their own. This is merely another option for military members or veterans and or their families. Families are also welcome in Veteran Centers. It's like having a home away from home. Well, in a center, it's a drop-in place, pretty much unstructured, although occasionally there may be some scheduled or planned activity going on, but people are able to come in and study. Big thing is they get a chance to talk to other veterans, to discuss what's going on with them, their experiences in college, their experiences in the military, and it's just a great place to to get to be with other people like you.
But I'll bring
And
you
that's a
this
very
evening,
common
Joey.
theme with
Yeah.
veterans. They want to be with others that speak their language. A veteran or their family member can expect through a veteran center to get information about benefits, somebody to actually help them get through the process, and it's very complicated, particularly with the new GI Bill. It's very, very complex. But somebody in a center can be there to help them.
Well, the vet rep at the school is kind of like your liaison between becoming a student again and being a soldier. So, and you have all of these benefits. I mean, you have stacks of benefits and what you can do with them and how you can use them. And that person is supposed to help you figure out like what is good for you and what you can do.
They can help me specifically with my benefits as they relate to school. So if I have a veteran services benefit that relates to school, such as the GI Bill, or if I have questions about my benefits, that's what that office is there for.
So there's a lot of people that want to help you and will put in work for you and, you know, believe in you, and that's pretty cool.
What else they can expect is just a relaxing place to go, to veg if they want, or to talk to other vets, or watch TV, or work on the computer, do homework. It's just a fantastic place to go to really feel welcome, and I think that's the big thing. The campus is making them feel welcome. It's hard to describe if you're not a veteran, but there's an instant bond between veterans. You can speak about the same kinds of things that general citizens would not even know about or have experienced, but you can instantly bond with a veteran. It's indescribable, but veterans know what I'm talking about when we say we like to talk to others like us.
I love it. The older I get, the more I feel like I identify with other veterans and other people in the Army and other people who I can talk to and just hang out with. And this room provides a huge networking opportunity. So like I'll come in here and I'll study, and then next thing you know, I've run into a buddy of mine from my first deployment. Or I've run into, you know, somebody else that went on my second deployment with me. These resources help me out so much that I don't know what I would have done without them. I would have probably like blindly picked at an option and just went with it. And it probably wouldn't have been the best for me. I probably wouldn't have been able to maximize on the amount of money that I got. And I mean, I just would have been a little lost.
In the previous pieces, Joe Ruse and Heidi Schultz showed that the landscape of the GI Bill and college experience can be cluttered with tricky turns and at times too much information. We've convened a couple cartographers, if you will, who can help lay out a route and get veterans on the right path towards college success. Don Pfeffer leads the higher ed programs for the Department of Veterans Affairs and was an innovator of the Vet Service Centers. Steve France handles student affairs for MnSCU and was recently recognized by the military for exceptional civilian service as it relates to the treatment of vets on campus. And Eric Wondra is a Navy veteran and student at Century College. Don, first of all, let's talk about who's eligible. It sounded a little confusing, the guy who had to pay and then he didn't have to pay, and who gets what here?
Yes, there's actually several different GI Bill programs, and the one program where you do have to pay in is Chapter 30. But 1606, 1607, and now the new Chapter 33, there is no pay-in option, just your service to your country.
Regardless of what your service is?
Well, it has to be after September 11th
okay.
For the Chapter 33, and it has to be Federal Title 10 active duty service.
Okay. And Steve, there has to be more demand for this forever. We know the price of college is just going up astronomically. Is the demand there? Are people using this?
That's right, Mary. We're seeing a lot of veterans come to our community colleges, technical colleges, and state universities. In fact, between 60 and 70% of the veterans using benefits in Minnesota come to a Minnesota State College or university. So we're seeing more than ever.
Absolutely. Eric, what's your experience?
Well, like, when I first went to school, it was like really hard to like really get into anything. I mean, I went into the military for a long time, and then it was a whole new experience. And then after it took a little bit, and then I got used to the GI Bill. But the Chapter 30, it was nice. They paid for a decent amount, but then the Chapter 33 pays for a lot more. It pays for all your tuition, plus you get a monthly paycheck, and then I mean, it's pretty much, I'm taking care of, most that I could think of. So
Don, talk to us more about the success. Obviously, we've all known the GI Bill. My dad was on it. I wouldn't be here without it. But it has changed and grown and innovated throughout the years.
Absolutely. The new Chapter 33 post 9/11 GI Bill was designed to repair a lot of the inequities in previous GI Bill programs, and in many ways it's very similar to what was provided after World War II, which really was an impetus for turning this country around and getting us on the road to prosperity. This same GI Bill has that same potential because of the amount of benefits, type of benefits, and putting a safety net for people like Eric on a college campus to make sure they can be successful. So what we have is a new, improved version. It's very technical, though, in terms of your eligibility. Depends on the type of service, when you served, how much you served, and it takes an expert to sit down and help every individual make sure they're getting their maximum benefit.
And how do they find you experts?
Well, they come to campus. Yep. That's the first thing they can do. They can come to any Minnesota State College or university campus. We have a veteran center now on almost all of them. And almost every campus has one, and so they can come there. They can also go to the website that is sponsored by the Department of Veterans Affairs, and Minnesota State Colleges and universities work with it as well. It's through mymilitaryeducation.org, and so they can get information there as a way of entering.
Eric, are there other folks like you? Are you finding this is getting to be more of a common experience?
Yeah, there's last year we didn't have too many people. This year there's a lot more. There's a lot of people that are in school that are veterans that just don't, I don't know if they realize that the center is like open for everybody, or if they feel like they're going to be obligated to do things like the military you were before. But I mean, it's just a hangout spot, really. I mean, we get information, we get a lot of new people that come in, we can tell them our experiences or like different experiences with the GI Bill and everything, and then I don't know, it all helps out a lot more than I guess just joining, you know, the college and not really.
Don, you called it a safety net. I
Yes.
think that was an interesting phrase to hear. And the woman in the tape before us was saying without this, she might have gone down the wrong path, that it's life-changing.
Yes, we hear that quite a bit from veterans and their family members who use the centers. They often feel they don't get the right information at the right time and in the right amounts. And they fall through the cracks in the system. They leave college or don't even start college. Don't communicate with their families about options that the families may have. And so a center is a place where we catch them. We will make sure they're getting the information. That is something that we work every time somebody comes in. We're asking them, have you been to see your CVSO? Have you been to the Veterans Administration for possible medical needs? We refer constantly, our number one referral source are the county veteran service officers for outside the campus. That is our job. We have 59 centers across the state now that have been established since 2006, and I have 12 coordinators that work with all of the campuses, those 59, as well as others that don't yet have a center. So we have professionals out there that can deal with benefits, help people stay within that safety net, and monitor and make sure things are going well for veterans.
And how do you make it veteran-friendly on campus?
We have been working since 2003 to make our campuses more veterans-friendly. All of our campuses have taken a pledge to be service member opportunity colleges. We've conducted training on our campuses for faculty and staff. We have done work on transfer to better take credits from the military. We have policies for deployment or for call-ups, so when National Guard or Reserve or others are called up, for example,
how do you deal with that, with people leaving and coming
yes,
back?
we have policies to make sure there's no adverse effect and that they're taken care of while they're gone, that we work with them to complete the class or to in some way make it whole for them. And we have other policies to defer payments, for example, when those benefits come late, so that they're not suffering or living off of credit cards or something like that. We will defer their tuition and their fees until the benefits start coming in. So we've set up an infrastructure to take care of veterans coming back home.
Great, thank you. For today's final discussion, we're bringing back to the set Mary Beth Galey of Lutheran Social Services, Commissioner Michael Pugliese, and bringing in Lauri Brooke. She's a County Service Veterans Officer in Becker County. Lauri, let's start with you and talk to us first about peer-to-peer support. You do some of that, correct?
Yes, we do. We have a great support system. Each district, we're broken up into districts, and anytime you have a question, you can call any of your fellow service officers and bounce things off of them and get advice from them. And that works out really well.
Like, how important is that to have support across lines?
Mary, I think it's very important. I think, they share their best practices and their experiences. And, there's so many different regulations and rules, and the law changes on a regular basis with the different benefits. As you heard, education benefits are very complex. A lot of the benefits are complex. So you can't be expected to know everything. So it's nice to be able to reach out to others and say, hey, have you had an experience with this? What did you do? What worked? So it's key and it's vital.
And I bet somebody like Lutheran Social Services helps do that as well, because you're always navigating the new laws and services out there.
We do constantly partner with our CVSOs in the different regions, and then we also look for ways that we can interface with our other community resources and other state agencies so that we can partner and really maximize the services that we're providing. Do a lot of care coordination with our CVSO partners.
And how about that broader community support too, beyond just the groups here? How vital is that?
It's extremely vital, and one of the things we're known for here in Minnesota is really working together, a collaborative effort. Nobody's claiming this is my turf. It's really about getting everybody involved, heightening awareness, sharing those best practices, relying on one another so that we can ensure that our veterans and their family members are getting connected to the most appropriate services to meet their needs, and whenever possible within the community they reside.
Or do you want to add to that?
We always do. We work in our offices putting together what we call package deals. If we have somebody that comes in working with the LSS for counseling and financial management issues, with Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans, if they have a financial need, working with that with our community action councils in the community to put together what's best for that family and that veteran, and working with the State Soldiers Assistance Program, putting together what's best for that family with all of the resources that we have.
And how about beyond community too, the family support too? We've been hearing about and seeing a lot of the families here. It's not just the veterans who go through this, but their kids, their spouses, everybody around them.
Absolutely. It's a trend that we're finding very common at this point because of the fact that it is not just the veteran that's impacted by an reintegration issue or a deployment issue. Our program also allows us to focus on the family, to be able to enhance services for that entire family. Really the children's issues, the parents, really looking at the comprehensive ways that we can add value to the whole experience.
Tell us more about the family and what you're doing for the families.
We can connect also with the LSS and the Beyond the Yellow Ribbon programs through the reintegration programs. We have that connection with those services also. And once again, that package deal, making sure that we do what's best for the veteran and their families with all the services that we can provide through the community and through all the state resources.
It does seem like there is some growing awareness of how difficult this is for the family left behind, the children, the spouses.
Very much so. We've learned a lot over the years, certainly since Vietnam. And the families serve and suffer along with the veteran, and it impacts them greatly. And we need to serve them as a whole, holistically, to make sure that everybody's getting the needs met that they have.
We've been kind of unique here, haven't we, in terms of other states too, standing out on how we're encouraging, and that the First Lady has been really active in engaging, helping the families.
Yeah, we really have. We've been leading the way in that. I think we identified early on that the families are really being impacted by this. A lot of repeat call-ups, several years away from home, children without their one of the parents, the sacrifices that the one parent that's home alone has to deal with, trying to balance a career, the family. It impacts them greatly. And then when the veteran does get home, sometimes there's other issues that they're bringing home too. So we really can't just focus on the veteran. If we want to serve that veteran, we need to serve that whole family.
And how about those repeat call-ups? Because that is unique to Minnesota as well. We've had some people who have served some very, very long tours. What are you two seeing?
We see a lot of families that come back and go back over again, and that's part of what, as CVSOs, we do the reintegration, the Beyond the Yellow Ribbon. We've gone to Fort McCoy. We're there for the 30, 60, 90-day reintegration. We work with the National Guard with that. We can then refer through the core program the families to the counseling, the children and the spouses for services that are of no cost to them. So we can refer the veteran to the VA to get their services and refer the families out for those also.
We see that manifested in things like marital problems, parenting issues, stress management, anxiety, anger, chemical dependency, and that's really very common presentation when there are repeated call-ups and families are dealing with the stress of coping, and that's very much recognized as why we bring value, I think, to the table and why our partnership is so important.
And a final take-home point that we want to hit here is that veterans earned these benefits, deserve these. Tell us about that.
Most definitely, Mary. You know, they've served, they've sacrificed, they're entitled, they deserve these benefits, and they're wonderful benefits. Both the federal government as well as the state and the private sector really have stepped up, and we have a very comprehensive, selection of benefits and services. So they need to come forward and ask the question, what is there for me? Now, not everybody needs to take advantage of the benefits. Maybe they don't need them, but it could be education benefits, it could be compensation for their injuries that they received during their service, and sometimes the only benefit a veteran receives is those funeral honors.
Thank you all so much. Well, thanks to our guests this evening. If you're a veteran or a friend or family member of a veteran and have questions about benefits, there are a number of informational services available to you. A good starting point for research is MDVA's Clearinghouse for Information at minnesotaveteran.org. Thank you for watching.
Minnesota Vets, Home and Hope is a co-production of the Minnesota Department of Veterans Affairs and TPT's Minnesota Channel.